Is that correct?
Well, no, they could have gone out the north side east exit. They could have gone out that and turned left. Or they could have gone out the west exit that goes on to Church, and they could have turned north and then west.
Okay, but if they're by that exit, that's the exit that they're at, they want to go out, they need to go in this direction,
Sure.
They would have had to turn right and turn around. Is that correct?
They would have had to make a U-turn in the street, yes.
Okay. And is that uncommon? Have you seen that happen before?
Generally not. Generally, if you're going to make a westerly turn out of the Marathon, you're either going to do it out of the north side east drive, or you're going to do it out of the west side Church drive.
Okay, now we had some testimony that April Millsap left her home and went up towards the trail. Do you remember the street she took?
Yes.
Okay, what was the name of that street? What?
Fulton, North
Fulton.
Avenue.
And how far is Fulton from this west exit at the Marathon gas station?
1 block.
Just 1 block?
1 block.
What would that be in terms of distance, in terms of, if you know, feet or yards or anything?
Well, I mean, it's one city block, one village block, probably 1,500, 2,000 feet.
Now, I know I'm jumping all over, but when you looked at the, did you yourself look at the security videos from the Speedway and the McDonald's for Austin and Alex?
I have looked at them, yes.
Okay, do you recall the time offhand for the McDonald's video?
I believe it was 6:33.
And do you recall the video from the Speedway?
It was, I believe, somewhat earlier than that, 6:25, something like that.
So, are you saying within 10 minutes of each other would be appropriate?
I believe they were, yes.
Now, how did your investigation of Austin and Alex stop? Was there a time that they invoked rights to attorney and did not want to cooperate any further?
No,
That never happened?
never happened.
So if your police reports indicate that, they would be mistaken?
My police reports?
No, from the Armada police, not necessarily yours.
No, I mean, if there's a police report that said they did that, then I would say that the police report's factual. I do not have any
Recollection of that.
firsthand knowledge that they ever invoked their right to counsel.
Okay. But you're also not denying that, subject to coming in through police reports, correct?
No, if you can introduce that, that's fine.
Is it a good time to take our lunch?
I think so, yeah. Take it.
Well, we'll see you back at 2:45. It's 1:45. Have a great lunch. Please don't discuss it. And I forgot to ask you, did anybody hear anything about this case on the jury, read about it? Okay, welcome back. Anybody go get that omelet yet? We'll do that. We'll all go after the trial. Huh? Okay. All right. Are we ready to proceed, gentlemen?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, we are.
You can resume the stand witness, and please remember that you are under oath to tell the truth.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Chief Smith.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chief.
I'm going to ask you some questions that may seem disjointed, but they're thoughts that occurred to me from the narrative that Mr. Cataldo did, okay?
Certainly.
So if they're not in order, please forget that.
Okay.
Did you ever work in Armada as a police officer or anything prior to becoming chief?
I did not.
Okay. And some of the Armada police officers are former Macomb County Sheriff's deputies, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So you don't have any first-hand knowledge if they knew or did not know Mr. Vancallis from any prior or other encounters, correct?
I do not.
Okay. And would you restate your position to the best that you can as far as what you think is the distance between the Marathon gas station where you go out, the west one, where, you know, where the no left turn sign is, and Fulton Street.
It's one city block, one village block.
And I think you said that was about 1,500 feet?
1,500 to 2,000.
Were you present when the victim's backpack was shown to the jury in this courtroom?
I believe I was, yes.
Okay. And were you present when the helmet was shown to the jury?
I was.
Okay. And do you know why the prosecutors had to wear gloves in handling those two items?
I can assume.
Yeah, I'm going to object to the relevance. Why I wear gloves is not something in the purview of him, and I think it's...
I agree, how is he supposed to know why Mr. Cataldo wore gloves?
Because
I see it quite often, it's not like it's rare,
I understand that, Your Honor, but he's the chief of police, and I just want to know, in his experience, if he has any idea. He may not have the same idea as Mr. Cataldo, or he may have no idea.
You can't ask him why Mr. Cataldo would, you could ask him why someone might, but not Mr. Cataldo, because obviously, actually it's all speculation, so just move on. No, it's a mistake.
Do you know if the victim's hands were bagged at the scene?
I believe they were.
Okay, and if the ladies and gentlemen of the jury aren't sure, could you explain what that means, bagged?
What that generally means is an attempt at securing whatever might be trace evidence that might be on the hands, whether it be DNA or scrapings or things like that. They would, what they call, bag the hands, so that when the medical examiner or the technicians get it back to a place, that they can unbag it and take a microscopic look to see if there's anything that are on the hands, and they don't want it lost during transportation.
Thank you, Chief. Do you know if that's also done with the feet?
I don't know for sure, but I don't believe so.
Okay. Based on your experience as Chief of Police, understanding that I think Mr. Cataldo's position is this attack took close to 15 minutes to occur,
Yes.
would you have expected a serious exchange of blood and DNA between the victim and the assailant?
Again, Your Honor, I'm going to object as to speculations. There hasn't been any expertise established as to whether or not he would be able to give a definitive answer to that question.
Your Honor, he's the Chief of Police. That's why I'm asking if he knows.
I'm a circuit judge, I mean, you've got to lay a foundation.
Oh.
You know, you can't just assume he knows everything because the police.
Okay, I'll lay foundation. Sir, I think you indicated you spent 28 years with the Bloomfield Township Police?
Bloomfield Hills, yes.
Bloomfield Hills, okay. And part of that was as a detective, right?
Part of it, yes.
How long were you a detective?
About 3 years.
And did you have occasion to ever work on any homicides?
Not as a detective, no.
Prior to that, as a patrol officer?
We had one homicide, and there was one case that we investigated as a homicide, yes. But I was not a detective at that time.
Have you been involved in assaultive crimes, not necessarily leading to murder, where there was extended assault between an assailant and the victim?
I have.
And have you ever been a first responder to something like that, sir?
I have.
And have you seen a significant amount of blood when that occurs?
I have.
If you know, did anyone search for blood or DNA on the motorcycle when it was first spotted in front of Muse's house, or as soon as it was taken into custody?
We had requested to be teched after we seized it. As far as when Officer or Trooper Peckman first obtained it, we did not do anything at that time.
Okay. And if you know, sir, do you know what is the transfer of DNA? How would you define that?
The transportation from one person or object to another person or object.
Again, probably between the assailant and the victim, that would be a transfer, correct?
That's what you would hope for, yes.
Okay. And if you know, do you know how long DNA stays on a person?
I do not know.
Do you know if any photographic evidence of this white and gray vans that you talked about was taken? Do you have any, were any photographs taken?
Yes.
Okay. And were they made a part of this case file? if you know?
I don't know what occurred with them. We took 3 or 4 pictures when he brought his van in, and that's what we used to show the reporting party the pictures.
Okay, and that's the young lady in the city of Armada, or the village of Armada,
That's
correct?
correct.
Okay, and were there any other vans that were tracked down, white or gray, or some combination thereof?
We tracked down a number of vans prior to identifying the one as the one that was in the subdivision.
And that's the one that you indicated that the gentleman who was the owner had said that he had 2 workers, correct?
That is correct.
And he had been in that area.
That is correct.
Now, I believe you indicated there are approximately 600 residences in the city of, in the village of Armada, and between 1,500 and 1,800 people?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. When you began this investigation, when you got the first little bit of information that a motorcycle might be involved, do you know was anything done to determine how many motorcycles are registered within the village of Armada?
We did a search within the area, a Secretary of State search. But at the time, as I recall it, we weren't initially, when we were going for it, other than the blue and white motorcycle, we didn't have specifics that we could break it down with, as opposed to, say, a Harley Davidson in an Enduro.
Okay, so just so that I understand you, this database that you accessed, what did it spit out? Just the number of motorcycles, just blue and white?
What it checks for is, you can check, a motorcycle has a specific license plate, a motorcycle registration. So we checked within an area around the village of Armada for motorcycles registered in the area.
Okay, do you recall what the number came back to be?
I'm afraid I don't.
Do you remember if it was in the hundreds or more?
Again, I'm afraid I don't.
Okay. Would it refresh you to look at your notes? Do you have any notes here with you on that?
I wouldn't have any notes on that. In most of my notes are at the bottom of those tip sheets.
Okay, and sir, in going back to that avenue of questioning, in regards to this information that you got on motorcycles, do you remember how many were blue and white?
Again, that part we couldn't break down. We could break down the registered vehicles within the area, but in Michigan, not just with motorcycles, but with cars too, it does not identify within a registration what the color of the vehicle is.
Okay, no, I get that, but what I'm asking you is this, is if you get a list of all the motorcycles that are within the village of Armada, correct?
Okay.
It just says motorcycles.
Actually, we expanded it. It wasn't within the village. It was, I think it was within 5 square miles, but.
And what would that include? I'm not familiar with the area. Would that include Richmond, Romeo?
Basically Armada Township, Richmond Township, and Bruce Township.
Okay, and then when somebody followed up on those motorcycles, correct?
We followed up on the registrations to see which we wanted to pursue, and quite frankly, that was it was more specific for us to follow the leads on specific motorcycles.
Okay, so in following these leads, do you remember if any blue and white motorcycles were come across during this search?
There were. We found blue motorcycles. We even searched black motorcycles. Anything that came up that was specific to a motorcycle that was part of a tip was followed up, investigated, and cleared.
Okay, do you know about how many blue or some variation of blue and white or white motorcycles turned up in your search?
I'm afraid I don't know that number.
And again, you wouldn't have any notes that would refresh you as to that, correct?
I would not.
If you remember, sir, do you remember how many motorcycles turned up registered to Mr. James Vancallis? If you remember.
I'm afraid I don't.
Okay. But at least one did, if that's your specific recollection or no?
That is correct.
Okay. And did you have occasion to check to see if James Muse, that's the fellow where Trooper Peckman found the motorcycle, was anything done to see how many motorcycles he had? And
Not in my recollection, no.
so you don't know if he had any, didn't have any, or whatever, correct?
I'm afraid I don't know.
Okay. You said that multiple agencies were involved in this, the FBI, the Macomb County Sheriff's Department, the Armada Police Department, and I think, did I leave anybody out?
A bunch of people.
Bunch of people. Okay. Who was assigned to tech the motorcycle?
I believe that went back to the FBI evidence recovery team.
Okay, and again, would you let the ladies and gentlemen of the jury know what tech means in this context, teching a motorcycle?
Tech means to take a look at it in a technical application, trying to find trace evidence that may be left behind on the motorcycle.
And if you know, that would include crevices and things like that, right? Not just apparent things, but even...
Oh, absolutely. Trace for the most part is hidden.
Did you ever see a report from that was generated after the motorcycle was teched?
I don't recall seeing a report with that in that regard.
Okay, do you know who teched the helmet and the backpack, if you know?
I'm afraid I don't know.
Would it be reasonable to think was it the Macomb County Sheriff's Office, or do you think
No.
still was FBI?
No, if it was tech, it was either done by the FBI evidence recovery team or it was done by the Michigan State Police Tax and Crime Lab.
And did you come to find out if, for lack of a better word, Mr. Vancallis was teched, right? In other words, his fingerprints, his DNA, his fingernail clippings, and bodily hairs were extracted from him. Is that correct?
I believe that was done by search warrant, yes.
Okay. And then do you know who detected those? Was it still the FBI, or do you know who went to?
Again, I believe that was the Michigan State Police.
Did you ever review the report, how it came back as to that, as to anything?
I don't recall that.
So, just so I'm clear, the FBI evidence response team, in conjunction with other law enforcement officers, basically checked the motorcycle, correct?
Correct.
The helmet, the backpack,
Yes,
and Mr. Vancallis, for lack of a better word, correct?
correct.
Okay. Was any DNA found that connected April Dawn Millsap to James Donald Vancallis?
There was not.
And again, just so ladies and gentlemen of the jury can get a grip on this, it was not because of lack of resources, correct? You had lots of resources available to you?
It wasn't because of lack of resources or lack of attempts.
Absolutely. And you had drones that came in, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, you had a team that you sent to Florida to check out on the young man.
We didn't send a team to Florida. We had somebody, I can't remember what jurisdiction it was in Florida, but we had an investigative team from Florida check on that one tip, yes.
Okay. And you got tips, if I understand it correctly, in this 1,000 tips from all over, correct?
That is correct.
And I believe you indicated that somebody even thought that the person was African American, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And I believe some of them seem to be what are called revenge tips, correct?
That is correct.
And just so ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if they don't know, that would be like somebody's going to court on Wednesday with their ex, with their baby's daddy, and all of a sudden they're saying, I think he was there, that type of thing, right?
I couldn't say it better.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Sheep.
Sir, did you have an opportunity to view the video from the gas station, from the marathon?
Yes.
Okay. And as much as Mr. Cataldo hates to see a horse that's dead being beaten, most of the witnesses gave their descriptions or some variants after seeing Mr. Vancallis on TV or some sort of media. Is that correct?
I think you're speaking with regards to the composite.
Well, the composite and some of the descriptions they said when they became more certain after the media was all over the news. Isn't that correct?
I guess within proximity to when Mr. Vancallis became part of the news, since the initial part of the investigation was relatively brief prior to that, I guess that statement that you made is true.
Okay, so in other words, there was not a single witness that said, I saw James Donald Vancallis on the trail with April Dawn Millsap at approximately 6:30 on Thursday, July 24, 2014, correct?
Are you talking prior?
Right, prior to anything. Nobody said that, correct?
Prior to the him making the media, I would agree with that statement.
Okay, and then after a while, there were some tweaking of some of the descriptions that seemed to put it more in compliance with.
I would not call it tweaking.
Would you call?
I would call it verification.
Okay, would you call a white dog turning into a black dog, would you call that a verification?
If the identification was on the dog, I would say no.
Okay. Would you call somebody initially stating that a person is a teenager, 15, 16 years old, and later saying in their 30s, would you consider that a validation or confirmation or tweaking?
Well, I guess I can see where you might believe it's a tweaking. I think that an identification that is spurred without any sort of police prodding is a verification.
I'm sure, I don't think I know what that means, but I'll move on. Let me ask you this. What about if somebody initially said that the person was about 5'5", 5'6", within that area? Maybe could have been 5'8". And then all of a sudden, after seeing the gentleman on TV, now they're saying that it's more like 6. Would you consider that verification, tweaking, or what would you consider that?
If the identification is based on height and they're trying to make it adjust, I would say it's tweaking. I would say that if it's based on the person's face in the visual aspect, I would consider that verification.
Okay, you've been in this profession a long time, right?
I have.
Have you ever considered yourself able to tell a person's relative height by looking at their face? And I don't mean to be facetious, I mean...
Well, I'm smirking because I arrested an armed robber one time and the guy said he was short, shorter than that person that he saw, but he was sitting in a Chevette. I think you have to take it with the totality of circumstances.
Okay,
you take the whole thing in, and if you see something that you're positive of, I've got no problem with that.
I think this may be my last question. So for the most part, the characteristics, the facial characteristics of somebody do not necessarily give a clear and accurate indication of their height. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your patience. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chief.
I think it would be better to wait for them to testify tomorrow, the eyewitnesses, and hear from them what they did and what they saw, as opposed to getting your impression of it.
I would think that would be a good idea.
I'm going to hand you 3 photographs and ask if you would take a look at those photographs.
These photographs are of a Dodge, if you will, painter van, white in color.
How many are there?
There's 3, Your Honor.
Where are they marked?
You know, I haven't marked them. I just showing them. Those are photographs of the white van. When Mr. Sheik was asking you questions about whether or not that van was photographed, Indeed, it was photographed, the photographs are part of the report?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
No redirect, Your Honor.
No, I'm sorry.
I thought you were done.
Do you have a chance to, over the break, determine exactly when the arrest was made? You were uncertain during my direct testimony earlier this morning.
Yes, he was arrested on the Wednesday after the occurrence, which would have been July 30th.
Now, you had also indicated that as part of the investigation, you ordered a pair of the Jordan shoes that the investigation determined were part of the potential murder in this situation.
I did.
I'm going to hand you people's proposed exhibit number 73 and ask if you would take a look at that box and the shoes inside and answer the question, are those then the shoes that you ordered for this investigation?
Yes, these are a pair of Jordan Flight the Power size 12 shoes in blue.
You had indicated that they were in blue as opposed to the investigation determining a shoe of black and white. Why is, I guess, the size important?
The size is what we were told is the size that Mr. Vancallis wears.
At this time, Your Honor, we move to the introduction of People's Exhibit number 12, the Jordan Nike shoes.
Your Honor, this is my first time seeing anything.
People's number 12?
So size 12 would be exhibit number 73.
Thank you.
No objection, Your Honor.
For purposes, Your Honor, of the next witness that will be showing some diagrams, may I publish those shoes to the jury by holding the bottom so they can see the print on the bottom?
Right now?
Yes, because the witness, I don't have it on photograph, and it would just be easier.
Why are you asking me? Just, they're admitted, do it.
Okay, thank you. Were these shoes then submitted to the lab for further testing, which is why you'd ordered them?
That is correct.
They can look at them too if they want to handle them, Mr. Patello. I don't have a problem. They're admitted into evidence.
That's fine. I mean, I would indicate that they were ordered new and processed. There might be some powder on the bottom, but there's material, what we would call hazardous material. I have no further questions.
Chief, you're not indicating to this jury in any way, shape, or manner that those are the shoes of James Donald Vancallis, are you?
I'm not.
And they were purchased with, lack of a better word, tax dollars as part of this investigation, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I believe you indicated in your direct that you had some information or some knowledge that you thought that the shoes that Mr. Vancallis has worn in the past were black and white, but similar, is that correct?
That is correct.
And these shoes, as we know, are blue and mostly blue, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, you indicated in response to Mr. Catello's questioning, these shoes were sent to a lab, correct?
That is correct.
And the lab wanted to analyze the tread pattern with unfortunate injuries on April Dawn Millsap, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, do you remember what those results were?
The results were that these shoes could not be excluded from the type of shoes that would have left the marks on April Dawn Millsap.
Okay, just so that we're not splitting hairs, so we, ladies and gentlemen, the jury understand. Not excluded also means not included, correct?
They can't, as I understand it, because those are not the exact shoes, you can't match the marks exactly, because as you wear shoes, you get cuts in the bottom of the shoes and everything. They can't match it specifically because those are not Mr. Vancallis' shoes, but they can't be excluded in that the tread pattern is similar enough to the markings on the body that those shoes are possibly the shoe pattern that generated the marks on Ms. Millsap.
Okay, just so ladies and gentlemen of the jury know, basically April Millsap is found, 911 call comes in at 8:19.
Yep,
She has some unfortunate marks on her body that seem consistent with shoe prints, correct?
correct,
Those pictures are taken of those shoe prints between the police and the medical examiner's office, correct?
correct.
Some sort of database is checked to look for shoes that are similar in pattern to see.
Incorrect.
Incorrect. Correct me, please.
Okay. What we did was we were told that Mr. Vancallis favored a pair of shoes, a black and white pair of shoes.
Let me stop one second. Who were you told that by?
I believe that was Crystal,
That's his ex-girlfriend,
his
right?
baby's
Mama.
mama. So we received the information that he wore these black and white shoes. Social media is a wonderful thing. We went back and we found a picture of Mr. Vancallis wearing the shoes. We determined from that picture, from looking at other shoes, other examples of what type of shoe we believe that to be. And it's this Flight to Jordan. And we went through, we took a look at those shoes. The tread pattern on the bottom seemed very similar to the tread pattern that was found on April. I ordered a pair of shoes so that we could try to determine if, in fact, those were the shoes that left the marks.
Okay, now you're talking about social media is a wonderful thing. This picture I think you're referring to is Mr. Vancallis standing next to a truck, correct?
That is correct.
And he's wearing black and white shoes, correct?
Correct.
There's no indication of what the treads of the shoes look like, correct?
Correct.
It's just a color scheme, correct?
Exactly.
Was there anything on those shoes that you recall that indicates exactly what make and model those shoes were?
No.
Okay. So you have somebody's baby's mama telling you that this guy likes to wear black and white Jordans or whatever, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then you go on social media and you see a picture. Did you see other pictures of Mr. Vancallis wearing other shoes on the social media?
I would assume, I don't know.
Well, wouldn't that be important to know if he basically seems to favor, I think you word consistently is when he favored these shoes. Did you see if he has other shoes for other occasions or wide array of shoes?
Our interest in the investigation was to determine whether or not these particular shoes may be the type of shoes that left the impression on the body. We weren't interested in another tread pattern that wasn't on the body.
Okay, did there come an occasion where there was a raid incident to arrest at Mr. Vancallis' home?
We like to call it executing a search warrant. You could call it a raid.
That's fine, executing a search warrant. And during that time period were shoes that were allegedly Mr. Vancallis, several pairs, were they either photographed or taken into custody, if you recall?
Yes, they were.
Okay. Were all of those checked to see what kind of treads they have and what make they are or anything like that?
We did, yes.
Okay. And this lab report that was done, it was done by somebody from the Michigan State Police that specializes in this sort of work, correct?
Correct.
And that person indicated that 80% they were excluded, it was 20% that he couldn't totally exclude them, correct?
Correct.
You purchased these shoes yourself, correct?
I did.
Okay.
Well, the village of Armada
The
purchased
village
it.
purchased them, okay. And you and Mr. Cataldo have handled these shoes, correct?
As of today, yes.
As of today, okay. So would you think that if they were tested, they would show yours and or Mr. Cataldo's DNA on them?
Yeah, I'm going to, again, object. I think it calls for speculation, it's lack of foundation. Now we're beyond, I think, what we're here to determine, that is whether there's
Why is it relevant? And why isn't it speculation?
It's not speculation, because again, this is the chief of police, he's got a lot of experience with this stuff, and second thing is that to indicate that he would
Well, you
think...
haven't established you've got a lot of experience with DNA. DNA is a highly technical area.
Okay, and Your Honor, my question, I asked him if he felt that he would expect to see that. I didn't say, would you know for sure, would you know with certainty? I asked him if he would expect to find DNA on those shoes after he and Mr. Cataldo touched them.
You can answer that question.
If those shoes were tested by a lab right now, would you expect that they would show yours and or Mr. Cataldo's DNA on them right now?
I wouldn't know. I guess from watching TV, I would expect that, but I don't know.
Okay, and also, I don't know if all 14 of the jurors touched them, but whoever touched them, the same thing would apply to that, correct?
I would think, but that's, again, that's not my area of expertise.
Okay, thank you. Do you remember when, during this execution of a search warrant, Chief, shoes were confiscated from the home, correct?
Correct.
Do you remember how many of those were Jordans?
That I don't know.
You don't know if it was one pair, two pair, how many pair, correct?
I don't believe any.
Well, again, would it help you to look at anything to refresh your memory?
No, but I know that we executed additional search warrants to try to recover them, and we searched a dump to try to recover them. My feeling is if we had recovered a pair of Jordans, we probably would have been satisfied.
Okay, let me ask you this, since you're talking about the dump. This is the dump that 16 bags of trash were taken to, correct?
Correct.
And you said you've been a chief of police in, Armada for about 9 years, right?
Yes, sir.
Is it common that if people have excessive amount of garbage, they call for special pickup?
Again, I can't speak to that. In Armada, twice a month we have large trash pickup. The residents are allowed to bring it in. I can't speak to the Vancallis' patterns, and I can't speak to the general overall patterns outside of Armada.
Okay, good. That's a good point, because they actually live in, is it Goodalls or Wales?
St. Clair County.
Okay.
It's different county.
So they don't live in Armada Village. So at this point, you don't know what the practice is there for trash, correct?
Correct.
Now, you did indicate that a FBI evidence recovery team did go out to the dump and spend 2 days, correct?
That is correct.
Did they locate the site where those 16 bags were dumped?
That I don't know. I know that they were charged with trying to find a backpack, a leash, a Carhartt sweatshirt, and the shoes, and none of those were recovered. So...
Okay, but just so that ladies and gentlemen of the jury and I are clear, they did find where the Vancallis dump was at. Is that correct?
They found...
There's 16 bags.
No, I don't know that. You would have to talk to the evidence recovery team. They were told kind of a grid that they should be, but I don't know that they ever found those.
Okay, do you think if they hadn't not found them on a case as high profile and tragic as this, does it make sense that they would have just stopped after 2 days? Wouldn't it be more consistent?
I'm going to object the question before it's even done, because it calls for speculation. When he says, well, you would think that.
I agree. It's all speculation. You know, what he thinks, what does he know? Not what he thinks, what he would expect, what he knows.
So you don't know if they actually found the 16 bags, correct?
I do not.
And you have no information to believe that any shoes were recovered from there, correct? Because that's part of what they were looking for.
Correct.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
No further direction.
Your excuse, thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a 15-minute break, folks, because they need to readjust this